Right. So quickly picking up from where I left off. So right, the main purpose of the main reason of having purpose and self-awareness as the central element is because I really truly want you to be fully aware of, from here on, whether it's your choices to do with your career or absolutely anything. I would want you to be aware of why are you making these choices. Are they influenced by family, society, and everything else, your surroundings, or are they truly coming from within you? That's something to think about. And the very last part here, uh, I want you to, or I would hope you would take away from this whatever I have, taken away in my last couple of years. Uh, and one of the most important things is that it's completely okay if you don't have it all figured out. Trust me, nobody does. Uh, Most of us, myself included, even now that I've sort of, you could say, I'm a lot more aware now than I used to be. I'm still just every day figuring it out. Right? I'm still winging it. Most people are just winging it. So it's completely okay to not have the next 5 years or the next 1 year or even the next 6 months figured out. And at a time like this, that's even a bizarre thing to think about. In a situation like we're in today with the pandemic, uh, virus is not going away anywhere. So it's weird to even say, I have, for anyone to say I have the next 6 months figured out. Nobody can say they have even a month figured out yet, right? But even if you exclude that situation that we're currently in, even if you look at pre-pandemic, uh, sure, there are people who could say, yeah, I completely have I know what I'm going to be doing for the next 1 year. It's all sorted. I have my goals ready and focused. But if you're not that person, that's completely fine. As long as you have, say, maybe a week or maybe today, like, do you have the next 24 hours figured out? If the answer to that is yes, then you're fine. Because even that person who says, I have the next 6 months figured out or I have the next 1 year figured out, can they live the next 6 months now? Can they live the next 1 year right away? No, they cannot, right? So even that person is going to live literally 24 hours at a time, like one second at a time, right? So I used to always believe I used to be afraid of starting something because I didn't know what my step 5 or my step 10 used to be. And then I came to a stage where I realized even if I knew my step 10, could I have taken that step 10 right away? No, I cannot. I cannot take step 2 until I take step 1, right? So as long as I have my very first step figured out, I should be okay. And then when I take that step, I can worry about the next one. So if you don't have it figured out, it's completely okay. It's really possible to discover your purpose at absolutely any stage. And I'm a prime living example in front of you. Like I've explained to you over the course of the last hour, I didn't know any of this, but I eventually just somehow stumbled upon it and I figured it out. So it's possible at any age, and if I did it at where I am now, you can certainly do it, while you're still in college or soon after. Uh, and just to close out, uh, if through this discussion, right, through the chat that we've just had, if at any stage you felt like, whether it was during that purpose discovery or whether it was after that, if you at some point felt like, wow, oh my God, I think I lack self-awareness, right? I didn't know any of this. I'm not aware of myself at all. Guess what? You just became a little more aware of it. So just if you read that once slowly, and let's end at that. If you just discovered that you lack self-awareness, you just increased your self-awareness. With that, I'm done with this session. Now, of course, open questions. Love to take as many as you have. Um, I obviously may
So
not be able to.
yeah,
I
yeah,
will.
I think we've got some questions ready. We won't be able to take any more today. We can mail you the rest if there are any
Yes,
more.
sure.
So I think
Anyone
Rohan
can.
will read out the question. Yeah,
Yeah,
Rohan, go ahead.
anyone can
Yes.
obviously reach out to me. Feel free to send an email, get in touch on Instagram. I'm happy to get in touch and answer any questions.
Yes, Dhruv.
Thank you, sir, for that very engaging and enlightening talk. We have collated questions from the audience and request Ujjwal to answer them one by one. If anyone else has questions, you may type them in the chat box. The moderator reserves the right to select questions for this session.
Yes, sir.
So where am I looking? Am I looking at the?
No, Ujjwal, Rohan will read them out to you. Rohan will
Okay.
read out the questions we have collected, and the rest, we will send them to you, whatever's typed in the chat box, because we are short of time.
Yeah, sure.
So the concept of dhyana, meditation, and mindfulness is intrinsic to this nation of ours. It's intrinsic to this soil of ours. What exactly went wrong that we in our country have so many cases related to mental health? Because it's in this country where this concept of seeking, of meditating had originated. It was not somewhere from the West. It is
Right.
our asset. So what went wrong? And there are many cases of mental health issues which go unrecorded. How do we address that, and what went wrong?
Uh, that's actually a fantastic question. Uh, but I would say, so you're absolutely right, whoever asked that question, that this concept of mindfulness meditation, it didn't come from the West. In fact, the West took this concept from us, or this is where it originated. But the slight change that I'll make over there is, there is obviously there are issues and challenges related to mental health, not just in our country. This is a global issue, right? And I think over many like decades and centuries, back in Buddha's times, and Buddha was the one who sort of introduced this concept of mindfulness meditation to the world, which is now 2.5, 3,000 years ago. Back then, humanity in general, we were living. Sorry, there's a little bit of disturbance. Can you mute whoever is muted? Okay, that's better. So back then, people, like human beings in general, we used to live a lot closer. First of all, I mean, of course, the population was a lot less, so we used to live a lot closer to nature. As a species, we were a lot more heart-centered. Our lives were a lot less hectic. We were, we had that sense of connection a lot more, back in the day. Over a period of time, we've abused the planet, nature. Like there's literally, a very small percentage of what used to be back then that's left today. No matter where you go today, whether you run away from the cities, and even if you go, high up in the mountains, we're surrounded by uh, heavy radiations. It's everywhere you go. There's heavy pollution. Our diets have changed. Our psyche. We're so preoccupied now with so much going on in our lives, and everyone is the sense of competition, and everyone is out to get to one another, and this whole idea of living a life in a very sort of, again, I've mentioned it a few times already, like following these checklists, right? So we have, long story short, we've just lost touch with who we are at our core, and that is this true essence of the being, right? So I like to say, I use this analogy in a lot of my workshops. So we're called human beings, right? So there's two parts to us. There's a human and then being. I think over the years, over several decades and centuries, we have very heavily sort of inclined towards human, and we've completely ignored the part that's the being, right? So the core of us is being. The human is just the shell. So we've really sort of heavily inclined towards just being human, and that's obviously, so we've basically lost balance, right? Being somewhere in the middle, being really towards being is just, in today's world is not possible. But even somewhere close to the middle would have been balanced. We're just very heavily tilted towards the human aspect of it, and humans are, of course, there's all sorts of negativity floating around. It's just consciousness, right? It's mass consciousness that has caused all of humanity to sort of shift towards where we are today. Uh, but it's a cycle. The Vedas say, I think there's some, I'm not sure, but some scriptures from the West as well might mention this. There are, it's a cycle of however many thousands of years, which in the Vedas is called the four yugs. Satya Yug, Dwapar Yug, Treta Yug, Kali Yug. So what is Kali Yug? Kali Yug is where we are today, where eventually towards the end, consciousness is going to prevail, and there is going to be sort of a reset, and we go back to where we started. So of course, this entire cycle is many thousands of years. So during our lifetime, we probably, I mean, during our exactly this generation today, we've experienced a lot during our lifetime, because now it's falling at a very rapid pace. But in general, in the span of a human life, 70, 80, 90 years, we see very less change. But over a very long period of time, it sort of keeps cycling back. We just happen to be alive at a time where we're towards the tail end of that extreme low of consciousness. That's my take on this.
Right, sir. Thank you very much. That was that is something which we should work on. The last question which we would be taking is, you are on a mission to make mindfulness more mainstream.
Yeah.
How would you convince corporates and government agencies to incorporate employee wellness programs, given the fact that many of the corporates still don't have this, maybe because of the cost factor, and or maybe because there's not much of awareness around this? And a follow-up question is, do you feel that we need a legislation for even this to ensure that mindfulness and mental health get their due?
Again, a very good question. So there's two parts to this. I think what you asked first is how would corporates and government agencies and whatever, how would organizations be convinced to sort of take this path, right? So you mentioned that a lot of corporates don't or are not engaging in these practices. Uh, to a certain extent, that is true, and maybe it is true because of the cost aspect of it. But in my sort of this very short experience that I've been engaging these sort of workshops recently, and I've been talking to companies. My in my experience, there are a fair bit of companies that are engaged in these practices. I think they're still caught on to older practices. For example, and that is this kind of speaks to why I started this particular the program that I did with mandala art as a medium. Because conventional meditation, and I'm not saying meditation is the only type of practice that organizations engage in. There's all sorts of wellness activities, right? They do yoga. There's one-on-one workshops with to do with like they have conscious parenting workshops. There's uh, things around spouse relationships, all of that, partnerships, parent-child relationships. There's so many things that go into this umbrella of corporate wellness. I think different companies do engage in different practices. Where I think personally, this is completely my own perspective. It may not apply to every organization just yet, but I think a lot of them are still approaching this from a perspective of, this is a fixed approach. This is how we've done it for years. This is how we've done it. For example, yoga or meditation. This is how it's done, and this is how we're going to do it. I think there's a need for introducing some sort of creativity and some sort of change which makes it more relatable. I think the practices that are being everything is not very relatable. Um, People are finding it, and that's why I started a program like this, right? Because the people who find conventional meditation difficult, that same person will find this particular practice very easy, because all you're doing is sitting and creating a piece of art, but you're inside your mind, inside your body, you're going through the same journey as you would when you sit and meditate, right? So something like this, where I'm approaching a similar concept from a completely different approach, so as to make it more relatable to the practitioner, and that's what I think makes it more received, it's more easily received, and when it's more easily received is when it's more thoroughly practiced, right? So I can sit and tell you all day, oh, meditation is important, but if you are the person who says, oh, I'm very restless, I can't sit still for too long, so you're just not, no matter how much I force you, you can't do it. Like if I can tell you, go to the gym, work out, go lift weight or go running. If there's no interest, or if it's also all to do with again, mental blocks, right? If you have certain beliefs about your own body, this is again, I'll tell you from my personal experience. I've grown up believing I cannot be fit, because when I was a child, yes, truth is I may have been lazy, but because I was repeatedly told that, and because I was, my body, literally my structure is not, I'm not very broad built. I'm small, I'm a, more lean structure. So I was told by parents and uncles and aunts, oh, he's always going to be weak, right? He's not never going to be strong. So I taught myself those things are never going to be, and that's why I could go to the gym for many years. It's not because I can't go and lift weight. It's because in my mind, I'd already made my choice that gym is not for me. Just like that, that was one example. So we've all been through our conditioning, and because of certain things we believe about ourselves, is why I think a lot of people are not able to, take on these various practices. So I think there's a shift required in terms of how we approach these practices. And again, if you ask me, I would say in the next 10 years, by 2030, there's a massive shift coming in terms of, you mentioned governments. I think not just government, there's in corporates, in education, and I'm going down to not colleges, but down to elementary levels of education. I have a very, very strong gut feeling that meditation and similar practices are going to be, they're going to become mandatory for even as early as like a 3, 4, 5 year old child, because those are going to be, that's going to be the way a child is going to be taught about. Like, I'll give you a very quick example. There are already schools in UK, primary schools in UK, several schools, not one or two, all around the UK. There are already schools where uh, kids, when a little kid is punished in our times, go stand outside the door, or go stand near the blackboard and like look at the face of the other side of the wall and say, there the punishment is go to a quiet room and sit and contemplate what you did, right? Think about what you did and think about why it's wrong. This is self-exploration. So when a child is taught something like that at the age of 4, 3 or 4 or 5, there is no concept of conditioning. There's no, because a child is left to explore themselves on their own, right? A child teaches themselves what is right or wrong as opposed to the world teaching them. Because we just pass on to our kids what our kids, and I don't have kids, but we pass on to the next generation what we believe is right or wrong. And right or wrong is very relative. Everyone has their own definition. So I strongly believe that yes, we are sort of making that we're at that crossroads where, because mental health has become such a big issue now. I don't want to say big issue. It becomes so critically spoken about that there's no other way. It's the only way forward, where meditation and similar practices that not force you but sort of guide you into an inward journey. There's no other way forward. That's going to happen across corporates, across education space, and hopefully governments will sooner or later understand that it's time to make it mandatory. And sorry, what was the second part to that? What was your last part of the question?
Do you feel that a legislation must be framed to ensure that people comply with it, entities comply with it?
Yes, I do. Do I feel that? Do I wish it happens? Yes, of course. And I think there are now, there are enough number of change makers that are emerging that it's only going to be a matter of time before it gets to that level. There are entrepreneurs around the world. I would hope to get to that level someday. I don't know. But there are entrepreneurs around the world who are already working with Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies, not even 500, and governments to mandate these things for certain organizations. So believe me or not, it has already started. But yes, it's a very small scale at this moment. It's only going to become more and more and more, mainstream over a period of time. And that's why
thank you very much, sir.
My mission is to make more mindfulness mainstream. So I hope to somehow plug along and contribute to these efforts along the way. We'll see what I can do.
Thank you very much, sir. Thank you for such an engaging session. I extend my thanks
sorry,
to.
Just got time for a couple of questions. I wish I could have directly answered a few more. But
We'll send that to you, sir, via email. Thank you very much. Thanks to the attendees who have come. Thanks are also due to our coordinator, Dr. Mariam